Hello again, and welcome to the second session of Washington Arbitration Week 2024. It's great to see everyone again. We had a great kickoff on our first session here at JAMS. I just wanted to again thank our hosts. JAMS is being very kind to be one of our sponsors, as well as to host a number of sessions here this morning. And I just want to thank them for their support and organizing the meeting. As well, I want to also thank our other supporters and sponsors. We've had great enthusiasm this year from the various firms in Washington, D.C., which are very active in arbitration, international arbitration, investor-state arbitration, and we want to thank them for their support again. We have over 20 events, sessions, as well as networking events scheduled for the course of the week. We encourage folks to go to our website, Washington Arbitration Week, and register if you haven't. Just want to remind folks we have a welcoming reception tomorrow night at the atrium of the World Bank with support from ICSID, and Judge Charles Brower is our keynote speaker. That will be a great session. I want to encourage everyone who's in Washington and available and interested to register for that event, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Ian Laird. I'm a partner here at Crowell & Moring in Washington, D.C. I'm co-chair of Washington Arbitration Week, along with my colleague, Dr. Jose Antonio Rivas from the Strategy LLP law firm. We founded Washington Arbitration Week 4 years ago. This is the fourth annual event, starting very much in a virtual world, and now we are entirely hybrid. Every session is virtual. We welcome those online who are watching us virtually, but also in person, which is great. Great seeing everyone again. Our second panel today is one that's very important in the international arbitration world in particular. We all know that international arbitration can be very diverse, cultures, legal systems, the practitioners, the arbitrators. It's just the nature of our practice gives rise to a great diversity in international arbitration practice. And we thought it'd be very important to start off the first day dealing with that very important issue in a panel titled "The Experience and Expectations of Diversity, a Conversation with Foreign Attorneys and Partners in U.S. Law Firms and Boutiques, Academics, and Students from Multiple Backgrounds." And before we begin that panel, I just wanted to ask my colleague, Dr. Rivas, if you want to say a few words, and then we'll introduce our moderator and panelists. Jose Antonio.
Thank you, Ian, and welcome everyone. We have a full room here, and we also have at least 35 to 40 people online. So, that's pretty amazing. We have been a little bit stubborn in terms of not relinquishing those that made possible Washington Arbitration Week in the first place. So we have people from China, from Japan, from Europe now connected, which is a great achievement. And we also have moved fully in person, as you can see. And then there's lots. You cannot see them here, but I can see you. In any event, this panel is a panel which was in the makings from the fact that many of us in the Washington arbitration community have a foreign law background. Now a citizen, but at the time when I first came to Washington D.C., the question was, how do you actually make it, and how do you move around in the world of diversity? And diversity is not only with respect to nationality. Diversity is a question that goes in so many areas of life. Gender diversity, discapacity, and so on and so forth. So we wanted to put out there a panel of folks that have navigated either personally or by studying it closely, the world of diversity in international arbitration. So we have an incredibly knowledgeable and experiential panel. So thank you for being here, and thank you again, Margaret and Sherman, to JAMS for supporting us and for making this possible. And last but not least, thanks to the Washington Arbitration Week team, Maria Lucia and Juan Pablo, and many others that have been contributing to this. So, and now I would like to introduce a guy like Aaron Flores. I have the privilege of being a former colleague of hers at a law firm that many of you may know, and we work together. And now she's in a different law firm, heading the Latin American Arbitration Group, and she's an extremely knowledgeable arbitration lawyer, but also someone who's always very, very mindful about giving opportunities to diverse lawyers. So that's why she is one of our moderators and the moderator in this panel. Laila?
Thank you, Ian, Jose Antonio, Washington Arbitration Week, and JAMS, and my fellow panelists today. So diversity. Part of me wants to recall the signs that were held during one of the women's marches, saying something along the lines of, I can't believe we're still talking about this. Part of me can't believe it, but a big part of me can. Why? I could point directly to the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision in the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard case. Now, I don't want to be too U.S. centric because this is about international arbitration, but we do find that concepts, theories, jurisprudence in the United States tend to leak out of US borders, even in international arbitration, even in cases that have nothing to do with US or US law. So I did want to raise that. I did want to raise this particular case that was decided by the US Supreme Court, essentially eviscerating affirmative action programs in colleges in the United States. And I guess in short, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised in the slightest that the Chief Justice who penned that opinion also penned another opinion several years ago, saying the way to stop discrimination is to stop discriminating. That easy. That easy. That's all you have to do. Is if willing racism, misogyny, homophobia, ableism out of existence would somehow work to reverse the effect of centuries, millennia of discrimination. I guess what I'd like to talk about today is a slightly different approach to diversity. And I think we're all familiar with the oft-repeated quote that love is a verb, it's a doing word. And I would like to encourage folks to think about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging in the same way. They're verbs. They require action. They require doing, not just thoughts and prayers. And certainly not just words in a Supreme Court opinion to make things go away or for things to change. But enough of my soapbox. Let's talk about the action. Let's talk about our experiences. Let's talk about what works and what doesn't work. And we're here to discuss this with 4 people who have a wealth of experience in this field. I'm going to introduce them very briefly so that we can spend more time discussing this with them, as opposed to me listing all of their accolades. Let's start with Claudia Frutos Peterson, International Arbitration Partner at Curtis Mallet Prevost and Managing Partner of their DC office. Kim Keenan, former President of the DC Bar and also former General Counsel for the NAACP. Kim is now an independent arbitrator, mediator, referee, special master, neutral evaluator, and hearing officer with JAMS. Thanks, Kim, and thanks, JAMS. Rebecca Vélez, partner at HKA Company Credibility International, an acclaimed quantum expert focusing on valuations and damages calculations in international arbitrations. Last but not least, Todd Weiler, esteemed author and practitioner of international arbitration, now an independent arbitrator and co-head of the ICC's Task Force on Disability Inclusion. So, for my first round of questions, I'm going to start with Kim. Over the past several years, nearly every arbitral institution has placed some sort of focus or effort on increasing diversity. Could you please tell us about diversity and inclusion efforts from the arbitral institution perspective and perhaps what JAMS has done to support and amplify diversity in international arbitration?
Thank you for your question. I appreciate your opening remarks. I like it when we're all transparent. It makes it a little easier to have these conversations. Normally when I'm asked to speak about DEI, I come with my intense PowerPoint, and it has all of one slide. And on this one slide, there is a bouquet of flowers. In fact, it's a bouquet of flowers from my living room. So literally when you look at it, you're looking into my living room and you're like a friend because now you're in my house, right? And the purpose of the bouquet is to show people that when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what we're really talking about is a bouquet of all these different flowers that work together. They're different. They come from different places. They look different. They're different shapes. They're different sizes. But when you put them all together, they make it happen. They make a beautiful picture for you to look at, and they make people feel really great. So that's kind of how I see diversity. There's just the one where I have to keep it in my mouth. Anyway, like that, I believe JAMS is taking a holistic approach to how we see diversity, equity, and inclusion as we think about our international practice. Just like we do at home, we try to recruit very diverse, and I have to say, JAMS has made strides. You know, nothing is in perfection. We're always, you know, we're the practice of law, we're not the perfection. So we're always in the practice. And so we're getting there, right? So, you know, the numbers of women that you see on panels, we're at 34% now. And that's true internationally. 34% of our panels are women. We have 15% of our panels are people of color, and we have 4% LGBTQ plus, and that represents the whole body of the JAMS arbitrators, mediators, all those other names that she gave me at the beginning. And the goal is to try to push that out everywhere we go. So when we send out panels, we've signed on to the Ray Corollary Initiative, and that means that we pledge to try to have 30% of our panels be representative of not only our workforce, if you will, but also of the greater community. And you know, I just want to stop for a minute and say why this is important. I just did a tripartite panel, and I did something that you'll all get a good smile out of. All women. 3 women were picked to be the judges on this panel. And it was really, we just kept kind of looking at each other like, wow. But the difference between us was so sort of amazing. And every time we talked about an issue, and these were very contentious people, they were fighting over an awful lot of money. And all of our perspectives, I think, brought us to a place that by the time we got within 3 days of trial, I think they thought to themselves, we better settle this because they are going to decide. And we helped them to find their best result. But I think it was because they could see in all the rulings that you could see the perspective of someone who's been like a founder of JANS. You could see the perspective of someone who was a federal court judge, and you could see the perspective of me, who was, basically a trial lawyer my whole career until I started doing a little bit of everything else. And that is the kind of value add that you can bring when your panel is representative of more than just we pick, sort of the 3 oldest names on here. We picked the first 3 guys on the list. They really, I think they tried to do something that was really unique, and I think it worked to their purposes. So this is really something that is at the heart of what we do, but we also have partnerships. We work with arbitral women all over the world. We try very hard to make sure that our arbitrators let everyone know what their background is. I'll give you an example. We have a person on our panel, her name is Rebecca Ratliff, and she worked for the most famous insurance companies all over the world. And she's been in London and the UK many, many times. She's working with numerous groups there to create an ongoing partnership between JAMS and the insurance industry to make sure that we are wherever they are. And because she has this practice that already emanated from there, people don't always know. So we make a point of reaching out to our panelists to find out if they have languages or if they have experience. I know I've done a lot of international hotel contracts. You're always trying to leverage what your panelists bring that's unique, because we still do live in a world where sometimes people look at the panel and go, oh, women, I don't know if I'll feel comfortable. I've had that before. I don't know if I'll be comfortable with her. Well, you're comfortable with having a result that's based on your case and your contract or your facts, then you'll be comfortable with me. And I think that's the key, is that we're trying to, help people to not just rule something, oh, we're just not going to see color, or we're not going to see LGBTQ. We're so busy not seeing that we stay the same. We're going to see, but we're also going to see all the connections that we're all here because we love this. We really do love this, and we see the value that it brings to people. So I will stop there. I think that's 4 minutes, and I will turn it over to the next person.
Thank you so much, Kim. As one surveys the law firm landscape, from boutiques to big law, one might find it in geological terms to be a bit flat. In other words, you're not going to find great manifestations of diversity, not a lot of topology there to keep the geographical thing going. Could you please tell us about diversity and inclusion efforts from the law firm perspective, and particularly from the perspective of big law?
Thank you, Gaila. Thank you, everybody. It's really a pleasure being here with all of you, even, to our participants in Zoom as well. I will take, my first step is going to be a positive answer, Gaila. I know that we have a lot of bad things to say about this topic still. But the positive answer that I want to send, when you talk about big law firms and law firms in general, mainly in the United States, I think in the past, I don't know, maybe 5 years, I won't stretch it too much, but at least 5 years, I think we have seen a lot of changes in big law to try to incorporate diversity and inclusion programs, in the sense that law firms have now they're part of the movement that they need to incorporate this type of programs, in their own firms. I think you're now seeing a little bit more beyond the U.S. As Ian was saying, and this is a very international community, and we deal with a lot of international lawyers. And And you can tell that this thing going on in the US is really influencing also some of the major law firms around the world, I would say. But I also want to add to my answer something that I think is part of reality. I don't think that big law firms started incorporating these programs into their activities of modus operandi because they are nice people. I think it's more because they were pushed by society. They were pushed by the potential clients. I mean, we have seen a tremendous change also in potential clients' requests to big law firms. When they come to you and they try to see if you are the right firm to represent them, they are constantly asking and I think challenging the law firms in order to really inform them, but not only inform them, but also kind of prove through numbers that the law firm is actually out there. So you will see in all these bidding processes that you do, at least in my area, that I do international arbitration, commercial and investment arbitration, you will see that there is a big push by the shareholders or the actors or the potential clients that they want to know. They want to know how real really is diversity and inclusion, inside the firm. And I think because of that and because of the way that the world is going, the society is going, I think law firms are, I think at this point, genuinely trying to do something about it. I think you will find programs that they are more sophisticated in some of the more big law firms, maybe other small, medium-sized law firms. They do their share. But I wanted to start with that because I think it's a positive change. I mean, I'm not going to reveal my age here, but when I started practicing international arbitration, I mean, the landscape was very different. Starting as a young associate, a foreign, not even associate, I was an international lawyer because not even the DC bar understood us at the time. You were seen as that. You were seen as a foreign lawyer, and then you internally in the law firm, you didn't really fit anywhere, So, and that is not the landscape that I see now in a lot of the big law firms. So I'm going to stop there, and then we can come back to the big criticisms and challenges. But I wanted to start with something positive.
I just want to say that I wasn't president when we were having these discussions.
Thank you, Claudia and Tim. Rebecca. Rebecca has the distinct privilege of being in a professional field with even more abysmal stats, I believe, on diversity than law firms. And that's the field of expert witnesses. But just last year, Rebecca and other expert witness colleagues created the Equal Representation for Expert Witnesses Pledge, or the ERE. Rebecca, could you tell us about diversity and inclusion from the expert witness perspective and the ERE?
Sure. So first of all, thank you everyone for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here today. And just to clarify, Gaela, I wouldn't go as far as saying that I created the ERE. All of that credit goes to my industry colleagues, Isabel Santos and Catherine Britton of Alex Partners. But I'm very proud to say that I joined them very early in the process as a member of the steering committee for this initiative. And it really hits close to home because I checked the box as a minority twice, right? Like I'm Hispanic and female. So I will say that in my experience, being Hispanic has not caused any, I can't really pinpoint any challenges or say that I've been negatively affected by that. And in fact, to the opposite, it's helped me carve out my niche because I focus on international arbitration and a lot more specifically Latin America clients. So from that perspective, it has been helpful to be Hispanic and fluent in Spanish. But from the perspective of being a female, I have definitely faced challenges. And these challenges, they haven't come from my colleagues, the people I work with. It's mainly from the clients, which, like I said, for me are typically Latin American governments or council representing Latin American governments. I've been told by clients that even though they understand that I'm the one doing a lot of the work, or in some cases, like most of the supporting work, that when it comes to testifying, they want a white male. And there was one specific case, which thankfully this was years ago and I've never had something as extreme happen again. But they specifically said they wanted a male with no hair or white hair, which I think is offensive to males in the industry as well. But I guess that's a whole different story. You're okay with that?
A panel of one, a panel of one.
So upon joining the ERE, one of the first things that we wanted to accomplish was to compile data on the number of female experts that are out there. It's definitely a male-dominated industry. And we looked around for different databases. We searched on like ICSID's website, Juice Mundi, and we couldn't really find any place where this data about the experts was recorded. So I was able to bring something to the table because prior to being part of ERE, when I was at Credibility, prior to being part of HKA, we conducted a study on the publicly available awards for international arbitration cases. And the purpose of the study was to establish like trends in how damages were dealt with and trends with lawyers, experts, and even arbitrators. The original data collection did not include whether the expert was male or female, but I thought, oh, this could be a good starting point. So I went back and looked at the data that we had compiled. And out of 328 awards that were included in the study, only 11 of them had female experts listed. And 8 out of those 11, it was a female expert in conjunction with a male expert. So we only really had 3 cases where it was solely a female expert. And we just thought that that's just crazy that we don't have more female experts out there. So the ERE took it a step further and we put out a survey of our own. And we ended up with about 620 participants from over 30 countries. And the participants were attorneys, both in-house and external, experts, aspiring experts, and even funders. And what we found was that 64% of the attorneys that submitted responses to the survey had not seen a female expert in their cases in the past year. And of the few attorneys that did see female experts, they only saw them in about 10% of the cases. So again, these percentages are just way too low than what they should be. So we asked, as part of the survey, we asked why was this happening, just to see what the perspective was. And the main response that lawyers came back with was just saying that female representation in their options as experts was low. So even when the lawyers were trying to present experts to the clients for them to select one, they didn't have many female options to present. So that is definitely a big push, right? And like motivation as far as the ERE initiative is that we want to get the names of all of these female experts out there so that we are given the opportunities. Other reasons that the lawyers said that they believe the reasons they hadn't seen a lot of female experts is that clients wanted to use experts that they have used in the past. Right, so if a client has used an expert for a while and then all of a sudden you're getting a new female expert, they'll default to the male expert that they've used in the past. So that kind of puts us in a vicious cycle of, okay, well, I want to get more experience, but if you don't give me a chance, how am I going to get that experience? And then The third reason that came up was that there weren't a lot of women in senior positions at consulting firms. And this could be due to various reasons, whether it's like women's like innate sense of staying home with kids, or just having to want a better work-life balance. But that is something that we're also trying to come up with ideas within the ERE as to how to help women get to these more senior positions within their firm. And so the ERE, along with promoting females and participating at conferences and just enhancing visibility, like we will continue to run this survey. I'm not sure if we're going to do it yearly, but definitely every few years, with hopes that these statistics change and that we do see more females appointed as experts.
Thank you, Rebecca. So starting about 2 years ago, you
Your audio off.
You stay muted. You, along with Simon Maynard, spearheaded the ICC's new task force on disability and inclusion in international arbitration, with the mission to make dispute resolution more inclusive for people with disabilities. And less than 1 month ago, the ICC task force released its guide on disability inclusion in international arbitration. Could you tell us about the newly released guide and diversity and inclusion efforts from the perspective of disability rights advocates?
I'd love to. So this was actually the very first act of the current ICC president, Claudia Sullivan, as president. It was very important to bring. We're happy that we were able to produce for her. There were 3 co-chairs. Another one, Katya, was able to participate because of health issues that she had related to her disabilities, but we did get to work with her towards the end, which was great. The task force had about 60 people on it, and I'd say about 3 dozen were quite active. About a dozen were really, really active. Took 16 months from the announcement of the task force to a draft report, and we got there. Actually, we called it draft report originally. We ended up calling it a guide instead, but we got that finished at the 23-month period. One of the key premises we have is that diversity adds value. It's not really charity that we're seeking. It's just a realization of self-interest, especially when it comes to decision making, which of course is what arbitration is all about. You want better decisions, you have a more diverse group of decision makers. We extended the focus of the task force to all ADR, and also not just to the ICC, but across the field. And there's 3 parts to the guide. The first part is a toolkit. The second part are recommendations. And the final part is context. I'll talk about the toolkit a little bit later. With respect to recommendations, they focused primarily on the arbitration process, not so much on law firms and what law firms do in terms of law firm administration. That was beyond our purview. But we also focused a fair bit on extracurricular activities, if you will, such as this one, and how one might, not just how one might build panels, but also how one builds arbitral tribunals, and also how one conducts the panels and conducts the tribunals. With respect to context, we went into some detail and then edited most of it out to get right to the nugget of what disability inclusion actually means, what we think it means. And with regard to context, we also included at the very end, I think it was about a dozen questions. They were hypothetical, but they were meant to be practical. And these questions, which if any of you, I'm sorry, most of you are probably on OGIVIT, I posted most of those questions as invited by the OGIVIT moderators. And they're really just meant to make people think about what would they do when they're confronted with a disability-related issue in the conduct of their arbitration.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, for this next round, I'm actually going to pose the same question to all of our panelists. given your specific focus on diversity and inclusion, what do you think has worked? And what have you experienced as a challenge? And this specifically goes first to Claudia.
Okay, here's the nasty part of the conversation. Okay, so in paper, big law firms look great. You open any website, any law firm, I mean, we're all here, we know who is here. So any law firm, you open that website and you will see a big propaganda on how they are accomplished great and significant things in diversity and inclusion. With lovely words in paper, everything looks very, very well. The reality is different, and this is the nasty part of the situation. And why the reality is different? It's not because you are not getting the internal support anymore. I will even say something provocative here, and I will say that even my senior partners, they're all in favor of diversity and inclusion, as anybody should be. The problem is what? Is retention. How do we do for women, and I'm just only talking about women right now, women partners, associate, counsel, even paralegals, to stay in their jobs. That is what is critical right now, in my opinion, for law firms. I'm just taking my conversation from the point of view of law firms. And I think that's what law firms, they need to be working on. If they are not working on that, they need to be working immediately. Some people are doing it, to try to offer better conditions to women to have flexibility at work. I mean, we all went through the COVID thing. That was a great lesson. I bet that everybody in this room has heard about how the numbers, they were so positive for women lawyers because they were able to address some of the needs at home and also the needs in the office. There was a lot of flexibility. But we're walking away from those years. I personally hope that, back in the office, but I think I'm in the minority there, so, but anyway. And what is going on in reality? In reality is that when you have a young women associate working in those big law firms, they have, of course, ideally the same career as a male associate in the law firm. But then the reality strikes you when that young lady finds love and wants to get married and wants to have kids. Let's say it as it is, we all face that challenge to say, am I going to have kids or not? Do I really want to stop my career or not? I mean, how many female colleagues we know out there that they had to put a stop in their working years because they might have a situation with one of the kids and they need to stay at home because the kid is not doing well in school because it's sick or whatever. So it's that kind of reality check that I think law firms, they need to address more properly. And I am not even going to the discrepancy in salaries, in the big law firms. I know that this is a discussion in any law firm that you go. You will talk to ladies, and the ladies, they will be offended. The ladies will be, well, I suspect that I'm not being paid the same as my lovely male colleague, so I do exactly the same job, I put exactly the same hours, and when it comes to salaries, I'm not there. And probably I'm not there also because as women and ladies, we know this, we try to be perfectionists. If that brief is not right, it has to be, so you have to put more hours on it, you do that. We have this way not to say things in the same way that guys say it. I'm not blaming the it's okay to talk about those issues, that it's okay to talk about those discrepancies. You know, guys, they don't have an issue when they go to the review, when they just say, I want more money. Why we women will have to have an issue to say, I want more money? I think it's exactly the same thing. But, you know, I just give you those two examples, Gaela, because I really think that those are the areas where law firms, they need to do a little bit more. They need to think about what kind of programs we really have internally to support our female lawyers, our female paralegals, even female staff, you know, so all that it needs to be addressed. It is not a problem, the numbers when you hire. Now every law firm is making sure that they have the right numbers. The problem is retention. How are you going to have that young lady who started to go all her career to become an equity partner in a law firm? So that's the challenge.
Thanks, Claudia. I think you and I are pretty unique in big law. Since we did reach this far, it's a sad statement that, you know, we are two of very, very few, certainly women of color, that have made it this far. I would have hoped to have seen a lot more, standing here where I am now. One recommendation I have for everyone is that you look up the American Bar Association's report from 2021, entitled In Their Own Words. And it's a report that the ABA did, basically chronicling the reasons why experienced women attorneys are leaving big law. And it's not limited, spoiler alert, to family responsibilities. It's really not. A lot of it has to do with kind of just the internal politics of big law. And that's something I don't think a lot of people really pay attention to. So again, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, doing words. So I hope law firms can do more. Next, Rebecca. Challenges?
Okay, well, I think I agree with everything you said, Claudia, and I do think that it also applies to consulting firms, in the sense, like I mentioned earlier, it is a very male-dominated industry, and we don't have as many females up top as we would want to see. I mean, it's happened. I see it at different consulting firms, like my colleagues that work at consulting firms. We've had this conversation. In my personal experience, I haven't felt like I've been held back or anything like that. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm negative on my experience. But when I attend partner meetings, there are definitely a disproportionate amount of men in the room versus women. So I absolutely agree with everything that you said there. I think specifically with being an expert, the challenge is getting that actual appointment, right? Like actually being selected as the expert. And something that I found has worked for me personally in the past few years is that when we submit proposals, I've been one of those where I put in a proposal myself and a male expert. So we go in as co-experts. And I started getting experience that way. And then it kind of transitioned to, okay, now this co-expert will just be like a consulting expert on the case, and I'll be the testifying expert. And I was able to get some like that. And then from there, like progression to the point where now I do get appointments on my own without having to name a male expert as well. So that's just something from a personal perspective that has worked for me. I know that I mentioned earlier that that was kind of one of the, you know, negative numbers that we saw in the survey, that the females that we did see were with males as co-experts. But I really do think it works to at least like get you in the door, get that experience because of the way that the clients make their decisions. So that's kind of like from my personal perspective. And then I would say from the ERE perspective, like something that has worked is just the different events that we have hosted and invited people. Like we invite a lot of other experts, we invite law firms, and it really has helped to promote the names of female experts that aren't as experienced. And we make an effort to be visible at different conferences, like just recently at the ICC conference in Miami. There was some, it came up in a lot of conversations that I had of like new people that I was just networking with. And it helps as like an icebreaker too, right? To talk about that. And then they start asking me questions and, oh, what do you really do? And so I think that, almost using it as a marketing tool has been something that has worked as well.
Thanks, Rebecca. Todd, how about you? What's worked and maybe what have been the big challenges? I know it's very new. It's less than a month old.
That is the problem for that. But I think I probably should just explain a little bit more, and then perhaps that'll help. So I think that inclusion has two components, at least in the disability field. One is access and the other is participation. So access obviously is just as important now as participation. I mentioned earlier the idea that good decision-making involves diversity. That's participation. Access, of course, is making sure that people are physically capable of being involved. Disability can largely be categorized in two kinds of types. One is visible, the other is invisible. Although I prefer much more jargony, one is evident, and the other is manifest, but either miss or unapprehended. So you can see why we want visible, invisible. But I think it's more precise to say it the way I did. And whether it's visible or invisible will have an impact upon questions like stigma versus ableism. And you wouldn't, stigma is probably the biggest one, especially with regard to invisible. For example, why am I the co-chair of a task force on this? Well, I have ADHD. I also have some other things, but I have lots of experience with it. I have a son with ADHD and anxiety disorder and giftedness. I have my first wife, my late wife died by suicide. She was bipolar. Lots of other people, sorry. My adopted sister has fetal drug and alcohol syndrome. So I'm very familiar with lots of invisible disabilities, and I'm very familiar with the stigma too. I try to prevent that stigma. It's a lovely thing. Why is it there? See, this is ADHD now. I'm like, why is it showing me this? Stigma, of course, with ADHD is huge. I've actually had experiences when I was much younger in this field where I had, secondary infection, nobody be worried. Where I heard rumors that someone would say, well, isn't he kind of crazy? And I'm really smart, isn't he kind of crazy? No, I'm not crazy, I have ADHD. Why am I not looking at you when I'm thinking? Well, because I'm thinking, so that's why I'm not looking at you. Otherwise, I have to spend my entire time in my head with a second voice saying, look at them, look at them, look at them, look at them, so that doesn't become a problem. So when you're really successful and creative, you're probably lucky because they'll call you quirky and eccentric and they'll accept you, especially if you're a white male of a certain age, but not always. So disability is a very important thing for us to all start paying a little bit more attention to. And that doesn't even get into ableism, where we think, oh, well, that person's, they walk funny in their wheelchair, or maybe their face looks a certain way. Are they really intelligent enough to deal with this? There's all sorts of baggage to unpack about what we think we know about people who either have disabilities we don't know about or have disabilities we know about and perhaps don't realize what they're capable of or not capable of. So I think there's a long way to go. What we've done in our guide is not focus. We focus basically on a toolkit, and the toolkit, the most practical thing is a procedural draft order number 1, which can be adopted or adjusted by any tribunal, which will certainly help us get there. And then the other one, my little baby, is a mindfulness checklist. I don't have time to go into the checklist. I commend it to you though, but the idea that the checklist is every 6 months or so, it's just like, it's just 6 bullet points. Just go back there and look at it again and make sure you center yourself so you're mindful of disability and how it might manifest in ways you're not aware of, or how you just might not have thought that perhaps we shouldn't hold a hearing when someone is disabled, physically disabled, and you hold the hearing at a building that is historic and doesn't have a ramp. Like just simple things like that. Or I have celiac disease. It's really nice when I actually can get something to eat in the middle of a hearing, rather than have to go outside and find somewhere that has with my gluten-free app. It shows me where something is safe that I can eat. That's still something that I think most of the centers need to improve. So there's lots of improvement left to do, and hopefully we'll get there together.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah. Challenges for you. How is it getting to that? Is it 30% or 35%? 30. How has it been?
So in any entity, whether it's a business or a law firm or jams, if it matters to you, then you track it and you measure it. And when you track it and you measure it, you know whether you're on track to get your goal done. And it's so basic because it really is how businesses succeed. And sometimes we forget that when it comes to DEI. It's sort of like that special, it's different. But if we don't pay attention, then that's when you run into the retention problem. And so since we have signed on to the pledge of having 30% of the panels represent women and people of color, LGBTQ+, our participation has gone to 37% women, 26% people of color, and 6% LGBTQ. And again, I think that's because if you're intentional about it and you're measuring it, then that means that you're going to take the steps to make sure that you have success, that you're not going to look. I remember there was a time in the tech industry where you look at their numbers in DEI every year and it would be like, is it negative what it was before? Is it going backwards? And it's because, the truth of it is all the major corporations and now the law firms are starting to do it. They're doing extensive surveys and studies of the people who work there and the people who participate. And they're being told why the people are leaving or why the people are staying, or what's working and what's not. And then what happens is those lovely reports, much like that ABA study, get put on a shelf. And only the people who read them get the benefit of it. But if we would, pull some of those studies off the shelf and look into what is actually happening, the mechanism to make, so that's the challenge, is for people to really, live the pledge that they've made and look at what's happening and then say, oh, well, if women are leaving because they're not getting the opportunity to go on client meetings, then that's something we can fix. It's not like it's undoable. And so I think that's really where we are now, is that we have to walk the walk. We know what the challenges are, and there are fixes to these things, and they're not hidden. I think that's the clue, is that they're not hidden things. It used to be, it was like, well, we don't know why they left. Well, now everybody knows why people are leaving because they're asking. And so you make the adjustments based on that. It doesn't mean that, everybody will stay. It doesn't mean that there will be this perfect, panacea of a law firm. Law firms are challenging places to work. They require a certain kind of person to work there. But to the extent that the culture has to be adjusted, if you will, that is a thing that the entity decides. The entity decides whether they want to have a culture where they have diversity, they have more female participation, they don't lose women because they had a baby. Men had the baby too, so two of them can maybe, find a way to make that happen. So I teach negotiation at law school, and I had a young man miss class, and I'm like, why did you miss class? He said, well, the daycare center broke. That's really the best way to describe it. The daycare center broke. And so he and his wife were taking turns. And so, just so happened that his turn came in the middle of my 3-hour negotiation class. But I had to say, I kept thinking, well, is this a man that you would want to miss the class or take care of his daughter so that his wife could go to work? I'm going to let him have that pass on that day.
Just one brief follow-up for you, Kim. How do you, how do you get to the 30% if arbitration in particular is, as we like to say, consent is the cornerstone of arbitration, right? And if counsel, who may represent a relatively flat topography,
Homogeneous.
yeah, might be a little homogeneous. If they don't want to appoint an arbitrator or an arbitration panel that is diverse, I mean, how do you deal with that? How do you get to the 30% if you can't make them?
Yeah, I do struggle with this because, again, it's happened to me. I've had somebody say, well, actually, they didn't say it to me. Of course, no one ever tells you. So someone else has to come back and say, I was on the other side. And ultimately what they said was they weren't comfortable. They just weren't comfortable. So that they aren't going to say, we don't want to do it. That's not politically correct anymore. You can't just say that. So they'll say, oh, well, we weren't comfortable with those choices. I think the key is that, like anything, the arc may bend toward justice, but it doesn't bend quickly. And I think the more we keep pressing with excellence, the more it kind of becomes unstoppable. And I'll tell you something, the decision makers are changing in all of these places. If only for the turnover of the world, nobody does anything more than 2 years anymore or 3 years. And I'm seeing more women picking who their mediator arbitrator is going to be. And I noticed that when that comes around, my odds are better. So no, we can't make people do it. I know maybe saying something radical, we can't make people do it, but people don't act in their own disinterest. They act for their own benefit, even if it doesn't look like what they thought their benefit would look like. And I think we have to keep pressing that envelope until the people who don't get it recognize they're not getting the results they could have gotten if they felt comfortable with somebody who didn't look the way they thought the person should look. And I also think that for those of us who are always pushing the envelope, you know what? We don't have to work with everybody. Some people we get a pass. Let them work it out over there. We'll work with the people who want to work it out.
Thanks, Kim. So for this last round of questions, I'm going to ask you all a version of the question that my co-host Nicole Silver and I asked on the DC Bar podcast, Fatigue, on international arbitration. The question is, what's in the DEI field, other than what we've been discussing thus far, is keeping you up these days? Starting with Rebecca.
So I was actually on your podcast a few years ago, and I remember that question. And back then I said interest rates were keeping me up. It was when the whole issue of LIBOR going away and stuff like that. And in fact, I was cross-examined on that question a few months after the podcast. So, but I'm over interest rates now.
On to the next.
On to the next. I think what keeps me up now related to diversity and inclusion is, it does relate to what we've been talking about, right? Like, it's how do I make a name for myself or a bigger name for myself? How do I keep... Are we good? How do I bring in business and keep expanding that book of business, but yet do it all while having the work-life balance of being able to do everything that I want to do with my kids, which are 10 and 13, so take up a lot of my time outside of work as well. So I think about that a lot. I will say, going back to the whole retention issue that we've been talking about, I mean, I have thought about it. I have thought of taking a break and staying home to do things with my kids. But then I think about the enjoyment that I get after I do testify and we get an award in favor of my client. And I'm like, okay, so it's worth it, right? But I think about it a lot. So that's what keeps me up.
Thanks, Rebecca. Todd, how about you? What's keeping you up these days?
Well, for starts, thanks to my ADHD and the correlated delayed phase onset sleep disorder, I'm already up, so it's really not a problem. Just don't start things at 9 in the morning. It's just not good for me. So disability inclusion is not difficult, but we're nowhere near any sort of an optimal inclusion level here. What we need to do is convert goodwill to practical advances. And that involves, of course, promoting that culture of mindfulness I described. It involves recognizing and honoring agency and autonomy, which is what I think you were doing with the fellow in your class. It involves preventing the conclusion of our task force not being the conclusion of interest in our topic. So as per one of our recommendations, I think one of the key things would be measurement. And so I look forward to seeing and working with people to help us measure it, because that's a good first start. With regard to personal things, I find since I've worked at home, I've been basically at the COVID model since 1999 as an independent counsel and now arbitrator. So I've had that happen with my son anyway, because the school's in the backyard and my wife works out of the house. So I'm finding very much that it's whether I like it or not, it's become a very important focus. And I'm really actually, I shouldn't say or not, I do like it. I like being a coach to my son. I like being able to guide him through, because in the 1970s, nobody talked about ADHD. I'm able to help this little person who's brilliant beyond belief, but very frustrated very easily. And I'm thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to help him get better and live in a world where his uniqueness will be celebrated rather than down upon.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Todd. Kim.
I think for me it's intentionality. When I have a goal, a personal goal, I don't just say, I have this personal goal, I would like to achieve X, and then I, go about my day and hope that all falls into place. I want success, but I'm just gonna go back to, watching this television show. I think that's the key, is that people say they want to do something, but the intentionality isn't there. It isn't, again, nothing is a straight line from I got up this morning to I'm gonna go there. It's I intend this to happen and I take these steps to make it happen. I measure them to make sure that I've made progress so that I know that I'm really going where I say I'm going and not veering off to the side. And then once I measure these things and pay attention to how I'm figuring out what's going wrong. You can create a diversity and inclusion and equity plan and it's awful. How about that? Awful. It doesn't work. It doesn't get you closer. So then you can fix it, because now you know what's wrong. You know that X wasn't working. Let's try Y. So this notion that it's sort of this pie in the sky thing and we don't know how we would get there, I find that like I don't understand it, because everything you do that you care about, you have a plan, you track your plan, you measure your plan, you make changes to your plan if your plan isn't working. That's true in any business. That's how people profit in bad times and good times, because they make those adjustments. And I think here, for whatever reason, because it's a heart thing, I told somebody I joined this service organization and they have a song and they pledge. And I was like, you can't be somebody's friend just because you sang the same song as they did. It's earned. You have to put the work in. Friendship is still gotten in the same way. Even though we serve together side by side, it's still something that requires some extra work. And I think we've forgotten that part of the way there is getting to know people, getting to talk to people, having this insight and this understanding. Not that we spend all our days sort of touching and feeling, but that we have these goals and we're thoughtful about how we work on them together. So again, it's the practice, not the perfection. But you can't get there if you're not practicing.
Thanks, Kim. And last but not least, Claudia.
Well, a lot of things. Yes. Yes. It's stressful out there, and you just have to breathe. Breathe and breathe and breathe and get organized. But anyway, no, I think as a managing partner of an office, of an international law firm, as an equity partner, that sits in the board of one of those big firms, I think when it comes to diversity and inclusion and equity and inclusion, I think a challenge coming from me that I'm the whole package, you know, I'm a Latina with an accent and I have wild hair, I mean, I have everything, you know, so I get the, you know, I get the check. So that's fantastic. But what about my colleagues, you know? So, and that's something that I think when we get there, as you say, Dana, when you get there, you have to turn around and not forget who's coming behind. Because I think, you know, you have the responsibility to allow the conditions to develop in a working place, any working place, you know, for me it's the law firm, you know, so I love my law firm. I have been there for 15 years now, you know, it's a fantastic place. I'm having the greatest adventure in my entire professional life. I love what I do. But I need to integrate all the young women coming, you know, behind me, not because they're behind me, it's just a matter of time, you know, they're younger than I am. So, but is to really allow those conditions to continue to grow. And it's part of what all of us we have been saying, you know, you go to that meeting, you bring the young lady. You have a conference call with the client, you bring the young lady. You're talking to the experts, you know, you bring the young lady. Yeah, so you are doing a pitch, do it. Because that's the only way that you guarantee that they are also, you know, open the channel to continue growing. So, but, you know, it sounds very lovely in words. It's not that easy. You know, we still have that challenge of working and life balance. I mean, wonderful words, very difficult to achieve. I have 3 kids, 3 dogs, and a beautiful husband. And and let me tell you, just Friday I was doing a filing. You know, I told my mother-in-law, I'm not cooking that turkey. I'm sorry. So and she took it very nicely. You know, she herself being a fighter out there. And she said, go and do your filing. It was the nasty Thanksgiving that I had had. But hey, I did it. I had the support of my family, wonderful team to do it, and we made it happen. But it's those kind of things that I think you have to make the decision. What is what you want to do? Am I doing that filing or do I want to cook the turkey? Well, I felt like I needed to do the filing for my client. So that's what I did. But it's a personal decision. It's nothing else than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. And yes, if I can co-opt all of your comments into my motif, I think I would like to represent that diversity is a verb. It's a doing word. It's work. It requires action. It requires doing. And with that, I think we have a bit of time for questions from the audience. Yes.
Martina Polasek, ICSID. Thank you very much for this great discussion. Diversity is obviously really important to us as an institution, not only gender, geographic, also age. And then I would say first time appointments, because that's also sort of diversity, because we tend to see a lot of repeat appointments in ICSID cases. And in particular by party appointments. You tend to go to the same person over and over because that's what matters for your case. You're not, when you're really in your case, I mean, we can be talking about gender or diversity in theory here and everybody's for it. But when it comes to your particular case, you will want to appoint someone who you think is going to move in your favor. And so you could go to the people who you know who would do that. And I wonder, what will you do to overcome that barrier and appoint new people that you think would be terrific? And how would you convince your clients to do that? Right now, we make about 20% of all appointments, but there are a lot of expectations that we have make the diversity appointments. So we did, for instance, not long ago, we appointed an all-female annulment committee. We do promote women on almost every single ballot or strike and rank that we do, but also geographic diversity. And I want to hear from you what you are doing promoting diverse appointments to your clients.
Sorry, and for the folks following at home or on the screen, Martina Polasek of ICSID just basically asked about the phenomenon, particularly in international arbitration of repeat appointments, and what are we doing to essentially work to move that needle in a different direction, to increase the diversity of arbitrator appointments. Is there one of you who would like to speak first? Claudia.
Well, just from the perspective of, most of my work is as counsel for my clients and counsel as a party, and I started doing some commercial cases as an arbitrator myself, but from my perspective of counsel for my clients, what I try to do, Martina, is to have an open discussion with the client. I mean, of course, I cannot go with a single, probably it's also strategic, so I cannot go with a single name because it never works. You need to provide a list. So what I try to do is, a balanced list, maybe 2 and 2, 2 male candidates, 2 women candidates. And then I will try to go with persuasion, why those ladies are there, because they have the qualities and the experience to be there. But it's not easy, so sometimes, most of the times what you get from a client is, yeah, but she hasn't done any cases yet. Are you sure? How do we know? Well, I only know because she has the greatest book in international public law ever written, so you have to point out to those kind of things. And sometimes I manage to convince clients, but most of the time, they want to go with the candidate in the list that has most of the cases. But I have to say, and I say this in a very proud way, I have appointed female candidates out there that now they are having concurrent appointments, and I feel super cool about that because I was the first who made it happen. I love to brag about it, but I think it opens, it opens the idea of this candidate, and you know how it is. Once that person is out there, people look at that person, whether it's a male or a female. But that's what I try to do at this week in my cases and my clients.
Yeah, and James, I think that's why we went to the 30% rule. We're always trying to produce a more diverse list. I do think that the space, like you said, people do what they've been doing because they're used to what they've done, right? And that's why we keep getting the results that we keep getting, because nothing has changed. But I think there are always places where, like you said, where someone is pushed to the head and they say, look, they have the same thing that everybody else does, but this is their first time. Or maybe they haven't done this many times. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be space because everybody's not free. If I'm guy A and everybody picks me each and every time, there's only so many hours in the day. Guy A is going to have to step up for a couple of these things. And then that's how we get in, woman B. So I think some of that is it. I think that I had the experience recently of a very, very senior person at JAMS, taking a longer vacation than I do. And I wound up getting a couple of his kids, and they were people who had never used anyone else but him, but now they use me. So see there, it all works out. I mean, it's not an overnight thing. It's not a magic wand. I remember once I was working somewhere and everybody would want me to just solve it. And you're like, when the magic wand gets here with the gold and the jewels and the rubies, I will solve things magically. But until it gets here, we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. And that usually takes some time, especially if you want to do it right. So I think that there is going to be this sort of tension there. But I think as more women are coming through this pipeline, that more women are having more of these experiences, I think some of those challenges will start to fade. But the key is that we have to keep pushing that pipeline of people so that people don't go, well, I can't find any women. We don't know where the women are. Who knows where they are? We can't find them. But I know where I am all the time. And there are lots of people that know where you are. So time over time, I think it's whether we're intentional in pushing the needle.
When I was counsel, basically, I think it would come down to three things: ideology, expertise, and then collegiality probably being the most important. And if I'm mindful of the fact that there are a large group of people out there who might be suitable, and I might want and be mindful of the fact that I could promote certain people, then that would be part of the list, because one can be an expert, one can have an ideological opinion, and one can be collegial and have a disability. So it's not, I don't think it's complicated, but I think it goes back again to mindfulness and awareness.
Thank you. I don't know if we have time for, wait, one more? Okay, one more. Please.
Oh, thank you so much. Hi, my name is Kamini and I'm an LLM student at the George Washington University. I'm from India. Thank you so much for your insights, and it was just amazing. I have one question with regards to particular situation, which you spoke about somewhere in your comments. When we discover that there is an implied discrimination that is happening, maybe inside an organization or inside a law firm for that matter, and we really want to raise a voice, maybe against it or to get something, but also ensure that our job is not at stake. You know, how do we navigate that situation is what I would like to hear from you.
Thank you. The question for those following on screen was essentially, how do you navigate the very dangerous waters of speaking up when you see some sort of implicit discrimination or bias, and wanting to keep your job? That was the question. Anyone want to go first on that?
Okay, I think the key is that you have to weigh. I think that sometimes when you're newer to an organization, sometimes you really have to, see what the culture of the organization is first. It's like when you're younger, it's like, that's wrong, let's solve it now. Let's go tell everybody it's wrong. Sometimes you do need to kind of like take a minute. And I would also recommend that you use mentors outside your firm. If I have a question that I want to ask about whether to fix something in a law firm, I call somebody at another firm, right? You don't call somebody in your firm because you don't know who your people are yet. So until you know that, you don't know who to ask. When you do know who your people are in the firm, go in an office, sit down, close the door. I remember a very senior associate asked me to do something at a firm, which was totally inappropriate. It was sort of like, my secretary's not here, but you are, because you work late. And so you can do this for me. And I remember thinking, this is not good. But I didn't, blow up the firm. I actually did the task that he asked me to do, not well, on purpose. But then I took him his little copies and I went in his office, I closed the door, I sat down and I said, I work here for real. I have a real law degree, a real license, and I'm here to be a part of the team. Now, if that's what the team needed today, that's what I would do. But I'm not here as a substitute for your secretary. I'm here because I'm really good at this. And I will tell you, that person became my champion. So you have to know when you can do that. I was so mad that I didn't weigh anything that day. But the point is that, if it's something where you're not altogether clear, or whether it's part of culture or something, you might check it out, just run it by somebody somewhere else, right? That's how you get your free pass, that it doesn't affect your job, because the person at the other firm isn't going to care what's happening with you. But they're going to tell you honestly, right? Because they don't have anything to lose. So that may be one step you take. Another step may be like I did, to go to the person, one-on-one, quietly, in their office, low tones, nothing, nothing that people want to call security for, but just something where, you're explaining how you felt and what you bring to the table. You'd be surprised. There are people who probably would have been on that other path who then say, they start to see you. I think that's what it is. Sometimes people don't see you as a person. You're so busy ignoring diversity and culture and color and all this other stuff that they don't see real people. And this is an opportunity for you to distinguish yourself as somebody who is character and focused and cares and loves the job just the way they do. And then that's a way to connect.
Yes, I'll keep mine short and sweet. I think, talking to someone outside of the firm about the situation that you're in is a great idea, to just get different perspectives of how they would deal with that at a firm other than where you are. But really, when you go to talk to, whether it's HR or a colleague about something that they've said, like, I think the big thing that you need to do is like be confident in what you're saying and be honest, right? Like, just be honest and, you'll get a better response when you go in saying what you truly feel and not going in all like crazy, making them call security on you. Like, just think about what you're gonna say beforehand. Do you want to add anything?
Well, thank you, Todd. Great. Yes, Jose Antonio.
Sorry for extending the panel, but I have one question for you all. It seems to me that whenever we are discussing diversity in general, including in international arbitration, we seem to be preaching to the choir. And one of the challenges is, how do you get those that are already within the culture of, yes, we are diverse, but they don't really get it? How do you get to those decision makers? And how do you get them to understand? Because of course we have Claudia here, who's an equity partner, and you all have high level positions. But I think that it takes more than that, because you might be an exception. And in big institutions, the culture sometimes is aggressive, sometimes is passive aggressive, sometimes it's silent, but things don't change on their own. So how do you get to that culture where yeah, that's the question.
In my experience, when you go to church, you want to get everyone to sing, you need a good choir. And the way you get a good choir is practice a lot. And they learn those songs, and then other people can sing them because the choir's doing a good job. So that would be the answer to your question for me. Get your choir singing on the same song sheet, learn enough songs and doing it well, and then we can work on everybody else in the congregation.
His answer really doesn't need anything added to it, because we usually are the people in the group, in the room, who's watching, who want to do this. We're excited about it. We recognize that it has a business purpose, but we need to let people know when it works, when it succeeds, why it works. When people see that something is working, they follow. Some people take longer. Some people are more entrenched in how they did it. But once they start to, see that the choir over here said, oh, you know what, we use these other people, we got it done faster, we got it done better. Oh, maybe we need to do some more of that. And they're doing that. And then you get people in your company who say, well, I've been looking over what they're doing and it works, I'm going to try it over here. I mean, it is a process. I worry when we think that it's a perfection, because it's a practice, not a perfection.
I don't sing.
I don't either, by the way. I don't see.
I don't sing, but I think it's talking. It's just keep talking, keep saying it. One day, someone is going to listen. You just have to keep talking. And I think once you get a good listener, things change.
All right, there you have it. We will keep talking, and hopefully we'll keep doing it as well. Thank you very much for everyone. And thank you to Washington Arbitration.
Thank you. It's my second time. Thank you for having me. Oh, well, see there. I gotta get out and sing loud. I can't. Yeah.